Hi friends, it's Aubrey from Crybaby Sentimental Homestead, and I thought I'd stop here so that you have a pretty view off to the side. That's Capitol Lake in Olympia, Washington, and I love this area, so it's a place I like to come and visit sometimes. And I was driving around and I was thinking about, of all things, Victory Gardens. And several years ago, I came across a couple videos on YouTube about Victory Gardens. And whenever I searched for those terms specifically, I found very little about the topic. And it's fascinating, really. So between the years of 1914 to 1918, President Woodrow Wilson, you can Google this, you'll find it, came up with this idea, this program of really encouraging the average American to have a victory garden. And the idea was to offset the food shortages that were occurring. The American family would be responsible for growing a lot of their own produce. They grew most of the essential type of crops, and a lot of the burden and the work was for children. One thing that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is the use of like pesticides that was applied by the kids and other members of the household. But I recall seeing images and videos of children actually like dusting the crops. And my take on the Victory Garden is without the use of the herbicides, fungicides, pesticides. I really like a beyond organic approach. Organic has some limitations that are actually less organic than organic like. It's much more like dictated. Okay, so I like flexibility. So I'm organic like, towards that end. The idea being sustainable, not harmful to the environment, not poisoning myself with junk. So and with like chemicals and things like that are not natural. I like to use organic ways of trapping pests. So I would use a trap crop like nasturtium to draw away the aphids. And then I love nasturtiums though, but they really are attracted. They really do attract the aphids. So if I'm having an aphid problem, I plant nasturtium away from my plants. All the aphids go there. And then whatever plants are affected, I can dispose of. So I prefer to have those ideas and to have like really natural methods for dealing with pests. So I'd like to talk to you about in dire times when food is short, even when it's not, if you have the ability to garden and you know what you're doing, and if you don't, you should learn. But if you know what you're doing, then you really should do what you can. If there isn't as much food in the supermarkets and the grocery stores, if you can produce your own food and somebody else can't, then they can buy the food and you can grow your food. So you can minimize the shortage by making your own when you can, right? Growing your own. One of the biggest things I think that needs to be talked about when planning a victory garden is that you should go for the absolute easiest crops, especially for your area, and go for crops that are not really prone to disease and pest pressure. When you have an area that's really prone to certain things, like I live in the Pacific Northwest, it's often damp and like moist. So I'm not going to grow peaches, nectarines, and stone fruits like that because they tend to get peach curl and a fungus that actually kills the tree and prevents it from actually producing the fruit. And I've tried, and I always push the boundaries, right? But that's for hobby and sport and for fun. So I grow those things because I want to, and it's fun, not because I'm hungry. But in times of need, when food is short and every square inch of your property matters, you need to grow things that are going to have a quick turnaround. If I'm planting a seed to grow a tree, that can take 10, 15 years before you get a fruit. Okay. So if I want fruit in my garden, I might grow strawberries because I can get strawberries the first year I'm growing the crowns. Okay. You have to think about what grows really well. I struggle growing watermelons and cantaloupes and other kinds of melons. So if I am trying to grow a garden to actually feed my family, like this is like the shelves are bare, I'm not going to waste my time growing, don't get mad, growing melons and things like that. If that is the thing that, like, no matter what I do, I've never gotten a crop. I have tried growing melons every single year and I have never gotten a crop. I tried growing loofah gourds and they never matured for me because I don't have a long enough season. Now I can give up my house and put grow lights everywhere and get them started early and up pot, transfer them outside and like squeak one out maybe. Okay. But in dire times, what you really need to do is grow the absolute easiest crops you possibly can, which do not have as much tendency to get diseases and die or to have pests. And preferably ones where you know of really easy ways of getting rid of the pests or dealing with the problems if they arise. Okay, so I'm going to give you my top 3 crops to grow. And this would work. I mean, anyone can grow these things. These are easy peasy lemon squeezy. Even the best, most advanced gardeners should be growing staple crops. You can always dedicate a little area here or there where you're doing experiments and fun things, novelties, things that are just pretty or whatever, okay? Things that you want to try. The top 3, okay, the most bang for your buck for me is potatoes. And potatoes are awesome because you can get seed potatoes from various different places. You can also sprout, especially if you do organic potatoes. You can let them chit. You can sprout them when they get the eyes on them. You can chit your potatoes. You cut them. You want like 2-inch about segments each. You let them heal overnight, let like scab over so they don't rot in the ground. And you plant them when the soil is not freezing. It doesn't have to be really warm, but it just needs to be not freezing. So after your last frost, I actually have started some inside before. It's not ideal, but I started them because I was desperate. They're starting to grow all crazy and stuff. Potatoes are great. Even the Pacific Northwest, I'm not sure a lot of people realize this. They grow them as annuals. They dig them up, eat every single potato, and then you have to go buy more seed potato. I have been growing potatoes for at least over a decade where they actually grow back after they have died. They die down, right? They wither down. I collect all my potatoes. We have a great potato salad. Have a great old time. Delicious. Nothing like it. You can grow some fun varieties, purple, pink, red. They come in many different colors. In the United States, we usually have the varieties that you cut them in, and they all look like they're white on the inside. But in Europe and other countries, a lot of them are like yellow on the inside. Really have a different flavor, actually. Very good. So you can have variety. Even if you're only having 3 crops, you can have variety in those crops. The potato famine happened. Big reason was because potatoes are clones, right? And so if you grow all the same variety of potato, if a disease comes along or an infection or some kind of blight, for example, potato blight, or comes along, it gets the whole shebang. Okay, but if you have lots of different types of potatoes, then some of them might be resistant. So don't just grow one variety of potato, grow several different varieties. Okay, you do want to have some that actually can kind of bulk up in size, because the larger potatoes tend to have a longer storage life. They are more shelf stable. When you're saving your potatoes, don't wash them off. You just kind of dust them off. Don't water them the day that you're going to harvest them. You let the plant die back so it turns kind of yellow and it falls over. You collect all your potatoes, set them out for a little bit, let them kind of be dry. Don't wash them, okay? Wrap them in like pieces of paper, or you can use burlap, but you basically don't want them touching each other or touching the container, and you want some airflow. You're going to put it someplace dark. If they're in the light, they turn green and they become toxic. So don't eat green potatoes. You can eat blue and purple and yellow and white, okay? But if the potato changes to green, that's a sign that it's had a chemical reaction with sunlight and it has become toxic. You could probably try growing them, but don't eat them. So a variety of potatoes, they all have a slightly different flavor. The blue potatoes I grew were actually purple, but when I cooked them, they turned blue. So that's fun for kids too. So you have your potatoes and everything, right? And you can keep them for a pretty long time. The larger the size of the potato, like I said, the better. If they have any that have skin that is rough, those should be eaten first. Any cracks in the skin, those should be eaten first. And wash them before you cook them. But don't wash them before you store them. Otherwise, they'll start to mold and break down. Okay? So to grow them, you still keep them in a dark place, but get them a little bit warm. Then they will start to sprout. And then you can cut them and chit them and then grow the pieces. Okay? That's your seed potato. If your potatoes form a small little berry, that is them. They actually make really pretty flowers, by the way. Sometimes they're like an orange, like purple and orange, depending on what variety you're growing. The flowers are beautiful. They will produce a very toxic small fruit that's very seedy, and it looks like a cherry tomato. So be careful. You can try letting that mature, and then you can collect the seeds from that. That is true seed. You would actually save it the same way you save tomato seeds. You can soak it in water, scoop out the yucky stuff, and let the seeds settle to the bottom. It's like you ferment your seeds, right? And then you dry them on a paper towel or a paper plate, and then you save those seeds and you can actually grow those. That's more like an experiment though. Okay, the way that is really guaranteed is to grow them from the seed potato, not true seeds, the pieces of potato. When you grow them, you want to make sure that each piece that you have has like an eye on it, those little sprouts, at least one or more. If you don't, maybe do like a bigger chunk. Like you can actually grow the whole potato. Sometimes if you buy a seed potato, you'll have like one tiny little one. Just plant the whole thing. Don't cut the little ones. And you just go about your business. They are the easiest crop. They're great for beginners. You can, if you're really hungry, put your hand in the soil and dig around and find a nice big potato and pull it off. So you can kind of pick before you actually do a full harvest. You won't get as big of a harvest. But if you're desperate for food, that works. Whenever I have collected my potatoes from the ground, I've always missed one or two. And then in that area, the potato plant will grow back again the next year. So I'm in zone 8A or 8B. It depends on which side I use to like try to figure it out. I've used Old Farmer's Almanac, and actually from time to time it will say I'm 8A or 8B. So, but even in Washington State, potatoes can overwinter. Different varieties probably overwinter better than others, but I've had lots of blue and purple potatoes, especially blue and purple, that maybe I miss them more because they're a dark color. When I'm picking them, the ones that are white or red are probably easier to see when you're harvesting. And so I probably miss a few more of them when I'm harvesting the blue and purple. But I've had so many plants pop up, volunteers. That's great for a victory garden. You want easy plants. Now, talking about issues that might happen with potatoes. So you could get potato bug, which is a type of beetle that eats the potato plant. And I've never had them, but one year I thought I had them. Make sure you identify your insects and your pests before you do anything to them, or before you try to get rid of them. Because one year I thought I had potato bug because it had this little white, little red and black insect-like thing. It was a larva, and a lot of them, so many of them. And I thought I must have an infestation. And it took me a while, and I didn't hurt them because I was like, I don't know if these are good or bad. So it took me for a while to identify them, and they were actually ladybug larvae. And so I'm so glad I did not eradicate the larva. They were actually ladybug larvae, and I don't know why there were so many in my potato area. They were not potato beetles. So, if you live in an area that's affected by potato beetle, you might consider other crops, but you can also hand pick them off and put them in soapy water and get rid of them that way. It's important to check on your plants and make sure, like, you're looking at them from time to time. Lift up the plant and look underneath to see if there is any kind of infestation on the underside of the leaves. It doesn't have to be every day, but occasionally. And so potatoes, definitely, if you are going to do a victory garden, it's not complete without a potato. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next one, and it's another root crop. And I'm going to go with golden beets. Golden beets are awesome, okay? So usually when you cut beets, there's it looks like a bloody mess. There's all this red dye everywhere. It's really messy, okay? Golden beets, I've gotten the seeds from Baker Creek, are awesome. You can, so it's a little bit different. The seeds are actually like a fruit, and so you can have actually more than one plant growing from one seed. I haven't really seen that be the case for me. If I plant one beet seed, I usually get one beet. But technically, it is a little fruit. It's kind of rough and jagged on many edges. And it's a wonderful plant. Let me tell you why. Why I would do a golden beet instead of a lot of other root crops. Well, a lot of root crops have edible leaves. I go back to the potatoes for a second. The greens, the plant, the flowers, the fruits above the ground for potatoes are all toxic. The potato tubers are the only part that you can eat. With beets, you can eat the leaves, beet greens, as well as the tubers or the root. Okay, so you have two crops. They are biennial. Okay, so beets are biennial. They produce seeds in the second season, the second year. Okay, so if you forget one in the ground, the next year it will flower and you will have so many seeds. I grew the golden beets. They were the most prolific. They grew the best. And I don't know who I got the idea from. I want to say it's Charles Dowding. I think he said, it might have been somebody else. If you know who it was, comment in the comments below. I want to give them credit. I think it's Charles Dowding. The person took like 5 beet seeds at a time. And they would put their little hole and they would put 5 seeds. And usually they always say, almost everyone says, separate your beets, like spacing them like 6 inches apart or 4 to 6 inches apart. But what you do is you actually plant more, like 5 of them. And then as they start to get big and bulk up, you take one out and that gives them space and they fill in the space. And then as those bulk up, you take one out and then they bulk up and then you take 1 or 2 out. And then finally you have one that gets pretty big. And I like to leave the last one. So I'll grow like 5, right? I'll harvest 1 at a time. Eventually I'm harvesting 4 out of the 5. I leave the 1 to go to the next year from each of the ones I planted. And then they go to seed, and now you have all those seeds. Okay, so that's awesome. Also, you can eat the greens. And beets and Swiss chard are actually the same species. They actually will cross if you have them together. So you don't want to grow beets and Swiss chard in the same area. And the beet greens won't be as big as the Swiss chard, but they have the same health benefits. So Swiss chard is often considered like a super green. So beet greens are a super green. So if you don't mind having a smaller beet, if you pick the leaves, your beet will be smaller, but you will get 2 different crops out of it. You'll get the greens, which you can wilt and cook and use like spinach, okay, or as other greens in a variety of different ways. You can look that up. But you get 2 crops. So super, super easy. The seeds are nice and big, so children can grow it too. A victory garden should be so easy that anybody can do it. Like no issues, okay? With beets, the biggest issue I have seen is slugs. And slugs really do like the greens. And you'll see like a line of where they like kind of like chew through and everything. What I found works really well to get rid of slugs, and I've seen people do like eggshells and stuff. You would have to have a lot of eggshells, which we do. But you basically like, you can make it really like an inhospitable area around it, so it's like kind of jagged and not comfortable for their soft bodies. But even better than that is a beer trap. Okay, you could probably use apple cider vinegar too. I haven't tried that. But a cheap beer trap, that's the way to go. And at least they get to die happy. Okay, so beer traps for slugs if you're going to grow beets. And my last favorite crop to grow, which would be really sustainable, would be tomatoes. Because they're so versatile and they're used in so many different dishes. And you want to go with an indeterminate variety. Indeterminate varieties will keep growing and growing and growing. And you get multiple harvests. You can harvest them every day. And in Washington State, because our season is a little bit shorter, I really like to go with a cherry tomato. And that way you don't have to wait for the bulk size. I've grown many different types of tomatoes, but like the, is it German, Johnson, something. Anyway, there's so many different types of tomatoes you can grow, but you're like watching it and waiting for it and watching and waiting for it and watching and waiting for it in Washington. If you grow cherry tomatoes, you're going to have a lot of tomatoes and you can use them every day. And I'll tell you the variety that was the most prolific for me. And if you're talking about victory gardens, we're talking about plants that are going to give you a lot of food. So, Green Doctors. Green Doctors produced the absolute most tomatoes I've ever seen in my life. There were so many. And the bad thing, so I won't always give you the downside. The bad thing about Green Doctors is that they do tend to split. So, like, especially with inconsistent watering. So if you have no water and then just tons of water, the little tomatoes will split. But I eat them anyway. I don't see why. Like, one day they're like firm and perfect little globes. The next day they are split. And I would just wash them off and use them. They're very acidic. One other reason why I would do tomatoes on my list is because they're very acidic. I don't can and pressure can all that stuff yet. That's not my thing yet. I am very, very busy. I work full time, have a lot going on. But tomatoes are said to be, because they're so acidic, one of the better things for you to try to preserve. They also do really well with blanching and freezing, and you can use them for sauces. You can also dry them. Larger tomatoes are easier for drying because there's not so much skin to flesh ratio. So green doctors, very prolific. You want a cherry tomato that is going to produce as absolute much as possible. You can use it in so many different ways. And so those are the three I would do. Okay. For pests, I really haven't had very many pests with my tomatoes. If they get blossom end rot, you want to make sure that you have calcium in the soil for them. But they've done really, really well. And they can do well with less soil and than the larger tomatoes. So I would do potatoes, golden beets, okay, because they're not going to dye your whole dish a certain color and have like some psychological issue with looking at your food and everything's red. I like the golden beets. I like the flavor of the golden beets. They taste kind of like an earthy carrot. And carrots are delicious. They're wonderful if you have space in your garden and it's not a bad time. But if it's like, not end of the world, but if we're going to the grocery stores and there isn't food enough for everybody, then I would grow potatoes, golden beets, and cherry tomatoes. Those top three. Okay. Of course, I would want to grow onions and garlic and all these other things. Okay. But if I could only choose three, if I only had room for three, if I only had the capacity to learn three new things, it would be growing those three crops. Okay. And I would grow as absolute much as I could. I would grow just tons and tons and tons and tons. And you can Google and watch on YouTube, like Russian potato harvests that so many people in certain countries and areas of the world are growing tons of their own food already. And they were told for like decades or maybe even a century, I don't know, to grow potatoes. And they've been doing it successfully for a long time. Even people who are elderly, children, elderly people, people with disabilities are growing their own potatoes. So we need to have full cupboards. And I don't want to go into a grocery store and buy the last bag of potatoes, which I've been seeing, they look terrible. A lot of the potatoes in the stores right now are green. I don't want to eat green potatoes. They're toxic. So you want to keep them like I told you, right? Potatoes, beets, beet greens, and cherry tomatoes. That's my top three. What would be on your top three? If you're a gardener, if you're a homesteader, and you have really good success with a really big super crop, like this is the most prolific thing, has dense calories, great antioxidants and vitamins, really good for, we are omnivores. We need a lot of nutrition. We need a lot of calories to sustain us. And if there are dire times and you have to work really hard and exert a lot of energy, you want a lot of that. Okay? You don't want just the diet salad food. Okay, that has no calories. You want some things that actually have sustenance. And my bonus tip is you need a flock of backyard chickens. You need some hens. And you need them like yesterday or like 6 months ago. They don't start producing eggs until they're about 5 months, 5 months old, 6 months old. And the first set of eggs that they do are really weird and wonky. It looks like they just like got messed up in the assembly line. You have to have eggs. If all you have is an egg and a potato, you can bake your potato, fry up your egg over easy, over medium, put it on your potato, and even if you don't have butter, it tastes amazing. A little salt and pepper, you've got yourself a meal. You want to cook in some tomatoes, you can practically make, with those three things, the beets, potatoes, and tomatoes, and eggs, you can make some really hearty meals. So I hope that this has been helpful to you and that we will share this dialogue and keep each other thinking about how we can produce our own food, live in a sustainable way, be able to do this without polluting the earth, keeping ourselves from being poisoned by our own gardens, getting the crop for us and not for the insects. We don't mind sharing a little bit, just tiny bit, but we don't want an infestation. All right. So I hope that these ideas have been great, and I really do want to see a lot more videos on victory gardens. If you have your own channel, please make a video about your victory garden. I'd love to see it. I look forward to it. All right, everyone. God bless and have a wonderful day. Live long and prosper. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit subscribe, like, and comment below. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.